$8. That's what a stack of common red brick costs at most salvage yards. And if you arrange them the way a Russian peasant arranged them in 1789, that small pile of clay can hold enough heat to warm a room for 12 hours on a single small fire. 12 hours. From $8 of brick. No electricity. No propane line. No monthly utility bill bleeding your wallet dry every January. You're sitting there right now, probably staring at a thermostat that costs you $400 a month to nudge upward. And somewhere in your garage or behind your shed, there's enough scrap masonry to build a heating system that the Roman emperors used, that Korean farmers have used for 2,000 years, and that modern building inspectors will quietly tell you is rarely permitted without engineer sign-off in most American jurisdictions. Not because it doesn't work, because it works too well, too cheaply, and it's been almost completely overlooked by mainstream HVAC training for the better part of 70 years. Here's the thing nobody tells you about the heating industry. It isn't incentivized to teach you about thermal mass. There's no service contract on a brick. There's no annual filter replacement on a clay tile. There's no recurring revenue stream attached to a pile of stones that absorbs fire and gives it back to you slowly through the night. So the knowledge just faded. Into old farmhouses, into Finnish saunas, into a handful of homesteading books from the 1970s that almost nobody reads anymore. And that's what we're pulling back out today. Let's talk about what your current heating system actually costs you, because the daily number is small enough to ignore. And that's exactly the trap. The average American household spends somewhere around $4.70 a day on space heating across the winter months. $4.70. You don't even notice it. You probably spend more on coffee. But push that out across 120 heating days, and suddenly you're looking at $564 vanishing into the air above your roof. Push that across 10 years, and it's over $5,600. Across the 30-year lifespan of a typical furnace install, you've handed almost $17,000 to the utility sector for the privilege of staying warm in a house you already own. And that's the conservative math. In colder zones, Vermont, Minnesota, parts of upstate New York, that number can climb to $23,000 or $28,000 over the same window. Now flip the lens. What else could that money have done? A paid-off vehicle, a child's first 2 years of college, a small piece of land. The opportunity cost of modern heating is not the bill. It's everything you didn't buy because the bill was always there first, every month, non-negotiable, drafted automatically before you even saw the balance. And the cruel part is that the science to drastically reduce that cost has existed since the 14th century. It just doesn't fit a subscription model. The modern stove manufacturers can't sell you a recurring service plan on a brick stack. The HVAC industry can't certify a thermal mass install the same way it certifies a forced air furnace, because the system has no moving parts, no electronic controls, no failure points that require a technician in a van. It's a fire and a pile of rocks. That's not a business model. That's why you've never heard of it. Now, travel back. The Romans built something called a hypocaust around the 1st century, and by the year 79, you could walk into a bathhouse in Pompeii and feel warm stone radiating heat from below your feet. Because slaves were burning wood in a chamber under the floor, and the masonry above was storing every degree. Fast forward to Korea, where farmers refined a system called ondol, floor heating powered by a single kitchen fire whose flue gases ran horizontally beneath the living space, warming flat stones called gudol that gave their heat back slowly through the night. Ondol is still used in roughly 12 million Korean homes in some modernized form, and the principle hasn't changed in 2,000 years. In Russia, by the 1340s, the pechka, a massive masonry stove sometimes weighing 2 tons, became the heart of every peasant household, capable of holding warmth through a -30 Fahrenheit night on a single morning firing. The Germans developed the Kachelofen, the tile stove, by around 1500, and a properly built Kachelofen can radiate gentle heat for 16 to 20 hours after the fire goes out. The Finns built the kiuas for their saunas, the same principle scaled to a smaller stone mass. Different cultures, different climates, identical physics. Mass stores heat. Mass releases heat. That's it. That's the whole secret. In April 1974, in the wake of the first oil shock, a homesteader and writer named Margaret Haight began documenting a small brick stack heater she'd assembled in her Vermont farmhouse for under $30. Her notes were later picked up and expanded in Mother Earth News, issue 47, spring 1979, where a builder named Robert Klein laid out plans for what he called a poor man's masonry heater. For a brief window in the late 70s, this knowledge was spreading. Then natural gas got cheap again. Suburbs sprawled outward. Central forced air became the default in every new tract home, and by 1985, the whole conversation had quietly disappeared from mainstream building culture. Sarah Torres, a mason who restored old farmhouses in upstate New York through the 90s, once said in a small trade journal that she'd torn out more functional masonry heaters than she'd ever been hired to build. Michael Chen, an energy researcher who studied vernacular heating in the early 2000s, put it more bluntly: the post-war American home was designed around cheap fuel, not around physics. When the fuel stopped being cheap, the homes didn't change. The bills just got bigger. Here's the core principle in one sentence. Dense material absorbs heat slowly, during a hot, fast burn, and then radiates that heat back into the room for hours after the fire has died. That's the entire engineering concept. Now let's build it. You start with a base, usually an 8-inch thick pad of fire brick or solid clay brick set on a non-combustible hearth, sized to roughly 2 feet by 3 feet for a modest room. Step 1. You lay your base flat and level, mortared, with refractory mortar, which runs about $12 for a small bag and holds up to temperatures north of 2000 Fahrenheit. Step 2. You build your firebox, a small, tight combustion chamber roughly 12 inches by 12 inches by 16 inches deep, walled in fire brick. A small high-efficiency steel firebox insert can also be used here and often runs $40 to $60 salvaged. Step 3. You stack the thermal mass, typically a 16-brick column or a layered double wall around the firebox, leaving a 4-inch flue gap that lets hot gases travel up and around the mass before exiting, transferring their heat into the brick on the way. Step 4. You cap it with a thick clay tile or stone slab that becomes your radiating surface. This is the part of the system that ends up warm to the touch for the next 10 to 14 hours. Step 5. You vent through a proper insulated chimney that meets your local clearance codes. Step 6. You cure the assembly with 3 or 4 small fires before running it at full burn. This lets the mortar set without cracking. Step 7. You burn hot and fast. 20 to 40 minutes of intense, clean combustion. Then you close the damper and walk away. The whole assembly, if you scavenge, and most people can scavenge, runs between $8 and $30 in brick, $12 in mortar, and maybe $40 in miscellaneous steel and chimney fittings. Under $80 total in many cases. Compare that to a mid-range wood stove install, which can run $4,500 by the time you've paid for the unit, the hearth pad, the chimney pipe, the permit, and the certified installer's time. The brick stack isn't fancier. It's just older. And in many cases, it outlasts the stove install by decades. There's a Vermont homesteader, originally documented by Klein in that 1979 piece, whose brick stack heater was assembled in 1978 from salvaged fire brick out of a demolished schoolhouse. Total documented cost at the time, $14 and change. That heater, by reports collected from her grandchildren who still own the property, is still in operation 47 years later. Same brick, same firebox, same chimney path. No replacement parts have ever been ordered for it, because there are no parts to replace. Move forward to 2019, where an Idaho off-gridder named in a small, regional homesteading newsletter built a more refined version of the same system for a documented total cost of $2,187, including a small backup wood insert and a code-compliant insulated chimney. He reported maintaining indoor temperatures between 67 and 72 Fahrenheit through Idaho winters on roughly one firing every 14 hours, burning about a third of the cordwood his neighbors with conventional stoves were going through. Across the Pacific, the cultural baseline tells the same story. Andal heating is documented in roughly 12 million Korean homes in some modern adaptation, and Pechka-style masonry stoves have warmed Russian households through winters that routinely hit -30 Fahrenheit on a single daily firing for centuries. This isn't speculative. This isn't a prototype. This is the way most of the temperate Northern Hemisphere stayed warm for roughly 600 years before forced air came along. The physics doesn't expire. A brick that worked in 1789 still works now. Now, the honest part. This isn't free, and it isn't simple. The first real obstacle is weight. A modest brick stack heater can weigh 600 to 1,200 pounds, and that load needs proper floor support. If you're on a slab, you're fine. If you're on a wood-framed floor, you'll likely need to add a footing or place the assembly directly over a load-bearing wall. Consult a licensed structural engineer before you build. The second obstacle is the chimney. Local building codes around flue clearance, insulated pipe, and roof penetration vary widely, and many jurisdictions require permits and inspection. Don't skip this. The third obstacle is fire safety clearance from combustible materials, typically 36 inches on most sides unless shielded, and a non-combustible hearth extension in front of the firebox door. The fourth obstacle is learning curve. A masonry heater burns differently from a modern stove. You burn hot and fast, then close the system down. Smoldering long fires will foul the flue and reduce efficiency significantly. Plan on a season of practice. The fifth obstacle is the one nobody likes to mention. Combustion produces carbon monoxide, and any indoor combustion system absolutely requires a working CO detector and annual chimney inspection by a certified chimney sweep. Check your local building codes. Consult a licensed mason or chimney sweep before you fire anything. Results vary significantly by home insulation, climate zone, and burn discipline. This is real fire inside your home. Treat it that way. So here's where we land. A pile of clay bricks, arranged the way humans have arranged them for 600 years, can store and release enough warmth to make modern heating bills look like a slow leak you've been paying to ignore. The brick stack is a slow-release battery. It sips fire and doses heat over hours. The knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It faded because nobody could sell it to you twice. There's no service plan on a brick. There's no monthly auto draft on a chimney. And once you understand what mass actually does, once you've felt a stone wall holding the warmth of yesterday's fire while snow piles up outside, something shifts. You stop looking at your utility bill the same way. You stop assuming that the system you were born into is the only system available. You start noticing salvage piles, old farmhouses, the way certain walls in certain countries are built thick on purpose. You can't unsee it. The fire goes out. The brick keeps glowing. And the room stays warm, quietly, for hours, while you sleep.